Hello and welcome to part 4 of the JB4000 series. This is David Ward, and when last I left you, we had added the rest of the waist, the abdomen area, and the hips to our little guy here, and got that all straightened out. So now I'd kind of like to make his head a little less exaggerated there at the top. So I'm gonna. Let's see, we were in sculpt mode, so I jumped back into object mode. Now I'm going to go, actually, let me turn on my screencast keys. There we go. Go to edit mode, and I'm going to put my 3D cursor right there around just above his eyes. And I want to put it, so I'm going to go Shift S, and I'm going to say cursor to selected, and it's going to put the 3D cursor right there where those are selected. Now I want to put it in the middle of his head, so I'm going to go ahead and just click over here in the middle, and it'll pop that there. On the side, it'll still be lined up. Excuse me. Coffee. Okay, so now I'm going to select these top ones and those there, and go ahead and hit the period button. So we're rotating and scaling along the 3D cursor there. Let's just scale that down just a little bit. And maybe let's turn on the proportional editing so we can kind of get a nice smooth. If I scroll my mouse wheel enough, it'll start picking it up. There we go. So a little bit smaller there. Maybe about there, and then we'll need to straighten up the ear radar antennas a little bit. Let's go ahead and control comma back around the selection instead of the 3D cursor. Just pop those back in. Maybe a little smaller now. And maybe drag them up just a tad. Okay, I think that'll work. Alright, so I like that a little bit better. Not quite as exaggerated. So now let's get in and start working on his arms. So what I'd like to do, obviously back in edit mode, we're going to add another cylinder right here. And since it was added on the 3D cursor, let's go ahead and undo that. Put the 3D cursor over here and Shift A, cylinder. There we go. And since we opened up Blender again since last session, since part 3, we have to reset all of these default values again. Let's go ahead and make that 8 again. And we can go ahead and set the radius way down to where it's just basically a steel rod, as it were. Tin rod, whatever he's made out of, aluminum maybe. Just a metal rod there for his upper arm. Just add a couple of loops there. And maybe one loop right there in the middle. Scale that down just a little bit, just so it's kind of stylized. And let's select that and drag it into place, maybe a little smaller. Drag it into place to put it there where his upper arms will go, about right there. Okay, then we'll go to side view, drag that back to about right there. Okay, now, as you could see in the concept, I kind of want the forearms to be controlled, the bending of the forearms to be controlled with one small piston there. So I need to add an attachment point there on the upper arm on the steel rod that we just created. So let's do that. Let's add a couple of loops right in here. Right there, and then I'm going to select this loop, Alt and right click, and Control E. Oops, let me undo all that. Escape out. Select that again, Control E, edge slide. We're going to slide that down to about right there, and let's come around to the back of it. And you know what? I was going to just have an extrusion come off of there, but you know what I think I'll do is, since he is a robot, and this is a steel rod, let's just act like there's a hole drilled through the middle. And we will just attach, or kind of put a bolt head, or a bolt on the back of it with an attachment there that comes back, and that can be what the piston attaches to. So in doing that, let's straighten the arm out just so it's a little easier to work on. So I'm going to select it all and rotate it on the y-axis. So I hit R and then Y to rotate on the y-axis, and that rotates it like a propeller. The y-axis is the to and fro, remember? Okay, so we got that straightened up. Let's get this guy, and I'm going to go ahead and flatten it on the y-axis. There we go. And let's go ahead and add a couple of loops there just to get a nice sharper edge. And where is it at in comparison to everything else? Way up there. So let's grab that, drag it down. There we go. Okay, so side view. And let's add a loop right there and one right there. And let's go ahead and add a curve to it because it's going to be jutted right up against that steel rod, so it needs to come out like that. So we'll go ahead and select everything there, and actually let's go ahead and add a loop there and one there. Okay, now Control L to select it all, scale it down just a bit, and then move it in to where it's touching that rod. And maybe scale it on the Z-axis a little bit so that curve is a little sharper. And let's go ahead and move it a little bit further in, so about there. And there we go. And again, let's go ahead and hit smooth shading there so we can see it being smoothed. Looks like it needs to come in a little bit further, a little bit more. So about right there. And then tell you what let's do. Let's duplicate that, Shift D, and then rotate it R180 on the Z-axis. There we go. And I rotated it like that. We can come over here, put it on this side. So now, when there's, actually we need to bring it just a little bit further out. So now when we put a bolt head through here, it'll come through here, and this will kind of be like the washer, as it were, on this side of the arm. So on this side, let's put a loop right there in the half of it, if I can get the right edge there. There we go. A couple of loops. There we go. All right. And then on these faces right here, let's go ahead and extrude those out on the Y-axis. Come out quite a bit, maybe about to right there, and then maybe one further. And we'll add a loop there just to make that a nice sharper edge there. Let's grab this loop, Control E, and edge slide that up. So that's a nice sharper edge there. Okay, so you can kind of see what I'm going for here. This is going to be bolted to the arm, and then the piston end is going to be connected to that right there. So that let's kind of do the opposite of what we kind of have going here now. Now, one thing you can do while you're modeling, as you can see, if I tried to mess with the vertices here on the piece we're working on, it's going to also select some of the vertices there on the chest and body. So what we can do is say we just only want to work on the arm right now. That's all we want to look at. So let's select that, Control L, and now we go Select Inverse and hit H, and it'll hide them. Now when you come out of edit mode, they'll still be visible, and if you want to still see it, if you want to see it again, you hit Alt H, and that'll unhide it. But for now, we would just want it out of the way, just hide it. So now we don't have any, you don't have to worry about accidentally selecting the wrong vertices or anything. Okay, so now I'm going to go and drag this back in. And tell you what, let's add a loop right there and a loop right there. And then maybe come in here and make sure that's still rounded out instead of being more squared off like that. Okay, and now I'm going to, let's go ahead and select all these, drag them back just a bit. And then we're going to select these faces on the end, just the end faces right there, like so. And we're going to extrude these out just a little bit there, just so we can get the sharp edge, and extrude one more time. And then one more time. Okay, so now you can kind of see what that's looking like. And let's go to our top view now. And let's add a couple of loops there on both. Right there. And, oops. Two of them. There we go. All right, and let's make sure they're lined up. So we can do that. Select both layers there from the top view and hit S to scale on the Y-axis 0%, and that'll line them up perfectly. SY 0. And there we go. Now what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to select these guys and scale them on the X-axis to where they're rounded out a little bit more, and then scale them on the Y-axis to get even more so. Okay, so now that's essentially going to be like a hinge, a pivot point for the piston that's going to come out. And we might even want to, trying to think here. Let's drag it out just a little bit further. Then maybe add some more loops in here just to, maybe one there or a couple there. Scale that down. Let's add one more right there. Again, just for stylistic purposes. There we go. And if you wanted to get real crazy detailed with it, you could go ahead and add a hole here in this guy. Let's go ahead and add a center loop there so we can get it even more rounded out. Even though this is a very minor section, doesn't really require a lot of detail. But as I always say, anything worth doing is what? Worth doing well. That's right. Okay. Well, what's going on here now? Must have hit the wrong button. Okay. Okay, so now we got that modeled out there. And I could go ahead and add a loop there and a loop there just to get a nice flat edge there. Okay, so we'll call that done, and before we call it done, let's go ahead and add the bolt head and the nut on the other side that's going to hold that onto our robot's arm. So we're going to Shift A, and we're going to add a cylinder. And this time, where did it add it? Way up there. Okay, so this time let's go ahead and set the depth, that's the height of it essentially, to about 0.5. You see it's still really tall, but let's make the radius about 0.5 also, and that'll give us a little bit better view. And most bolt heads have, you know, I should know this off the top of my head. I think it's 6 sides, but okay. Just to be certain, let me pause recording and go look at a bolt head, and I'll come right back. And yes, I was correct. They are 6-sided, so let's drop the vertices there to 6. Okay. And this will be our bolt head, and then also the nut on the other side. So let's make this congruent with something with a subsurface scattering. Actually, I added this outside of the edit mode, so it's now a separate object. So again, if we want to attach it to the original object, you just select that you're wanting to connect, and select the thing you're wanting to connect it to by holding Shift and right clicking, and then Control J, and now it's part of the same one. And now you can see the problem with adding the subsurface scattering to it, or not subsurface scattering, but subdivision surface. So many subs. So what we need to do is kind of do like we did on the other things to make them sharper. Just add a few loops here and there. Okay. And then one loop right there. Actually, let's use the old, or not the old, but I guess relatively new Bevel command. So grab those and Bevel. Control B. And now, actually these are selected there, so let's undo all that. Just the bolt head. Control B. And if you just drag your mouse just a little bit, it'll automatically add extra divisions there. So you get a fairly nice edge there without having to slice with the Control R. Make sure shading is smooth. And to get it a nice sharper edge, we can go ahead and add just a couple of Control R's in there, about like so. Now you can see it's quite a bit better. Okay, so we'll grab this, Control L, scale it way down, and maybe scale it on the Z-axis as well. Scale it down even further, just drag it down and put it where it's going to be. Scale it down, and then rotate it 90 degrees on the X-axis. There we go. Drag it down maybe a little bit smaller, and let's make it over to the side because it's got to compensate on the other side to not run into that guy with the actual bolt and the nut. So we'll just put that right there, maybe a little smaller. Okay, and then we'll go to our top view, grab that guy, Control L, Shift D, drag that out until it's coming out the other side, like so. And this will need to be the nut, so what we need to do now, Shift S, cursor to selected, and add one more cylinder, but this one needs to be a lot smaller. Let's go say 0.1 and 0.1, and this one we can give 8 vertices because it's going to actually need to be rounded, not a hexagon. So we'll scale that way down, about like so, rotate it 90 degrees on the X-axis, scale it down even further, and then let's just drag it out just a little bit, just so it's coming out the other side, and then Control L to add a sharper edge on there, on both sides. Okay, so there we go. So we got our holder for our piston tip. Now, one thing that'll help things look a little better is go ahead and add a bolt head and nut to the pivot area, because that's where it's going to be swiveling. So let's just go ahead and select these things we just made. Control L, select them both. Shift D, drag them over to here. Go to our side view, rotate them 90 degrees. And normally you go ahead and hit X, but it doesn't really matter because it automatically rotated on the X-axis. Now we'll go to our top view, line them up in the middle there, and just drag it up to there, and then drag this one down to there. And tell you what, let's go ahead and select the actual bolt itself and go ahead and drag that up just so we have a basis for centering up the rotation of the piston arm once we get to that point. Okay, so go ahead and say smooth again. Alright, so now we have the forearm pretty well set. Let's go ahead and get it positioned the way we want to. Actually, let's just leave it straight out to the side. I'm going to hit Alt-H now to unhide the rest of the model. Select that, Control L. Drag that up to where it's about where it needs to go, about like so. And now we're going to do the same thing we did with the neck and the waist. We're going to add like a rubber booty type of thing, a rubber gear shift boot around the top of the shoulder so it can bend nicely and not have to worry about adding all these extra joints and things like that for detail purposes. So I'm going to Control L, select all of that, and this time, since it's part of the center, we need to turn off clipping so we can Shift D and actually drag it away from the center. Then we'll go ahead and turn clipping back on. And now I'm going to Shift D this one, SX-1. And remember when we did that with the waist, remember it flipped the normals. So if we turn the normals on, you can see that those are flipped to the inside. Since we scaled a negative value, -1, it flipped everything. So again, Control N will flip those back the way they need to go. Go and turn those back off. And let's select all of these guys here in the middle. Scale them on the X-axis 0%, and hit Enter. And now we're going to go W, remove doubles, and it's going to remove all those 84 vertices in there, and essentially glue that together. Now, this being at the top of the arm instead of the waist, we don't need all of these extra. Tell you what, let's move this out of the way so we can work on it a little easier. We don't need all of these extra rows, so let's get rid of some of them. Maybe down to about there. Go ahead and delete those guys. Okay. And then on this one, okay, good. I was going to say we need to go ahead and make a smaller one so it can kind of cuff off, but I guess that'll work as is. Okay, so let's select everything there. Let's go to our front view, and let's rotate that 90 degrees on the Z-axis. So it's like so. And actually, I'd like it to be the opposite way. So let's rotate it 180 degrees there. Now, good to go. I'll rotate that up like so. And we're going to start installing this onto his body and the upper arm. And then we need to drag it back to where it fits into the space we made for it. We can also edit the space we made for it so it'll be a little more symmetrically square rather than rectangular as it appears to be now. Drag this back just a bit, and we'll drag that whole circle there for the arm indentation there. Scale it on the Y-axis, SX or SY, and then just drag your mouse, and then we can kind of form fit it a little bit better to match the boot. And that's looking okay. It doesn't fit it perfectly, but I think it'll work for our purposes. Noticing something there. Let me go ahead and raise that up a little bit. Okay, so now we kind of have that in there, and it looks like a loose sleeve, and I'd like it to be a little tighter, so let's start cleaning that up a little bit. Let's turn on our proportional editing there. Go ahead and start rotating that up to where it's coming more straight out of the arm socket rather than bending down like we did with the waist. Let's scale that down. Scale it down until it's inside the rod for the upper arm. So it kind of hides it. So there we go. So that's looking good, but again, it kind of looks too curved, I think, especially right in here. So what I want to do is keep working on cleaning this up until it's more of a direct cone shape rather than... I'm going to try to straighten this particular piece out here, SZ0. Oops. Let me turn off my proportional editing there. There we go. So that's more of a straight line. Okay, that's looking better. And let's do the same thing on pretty much all of these rows here. SX0 to straighten that up. This might get a little tedious, but luckily not having to select each individual vertex is very helpful in this scenario. So what I'm doing here is selecting the whole row. I think I've told you before, but just hold down Alt and right click and you select the whole row, then S to scale, X axis because we're going left and right horizontally, and then 0. So we're flattening it out, scaling it 0% on the X axis, and then straightening them all out as you can see. And then we can get in there and start tweaking it to match up more symmetrically. Almost there. Oopsie. Hit the wrong button, I think. There we go. Oops, there we go. Okay. And this guy right there. I think that's about it. Let's select that very edge piece. And then also looks like in doing all that, actually when we flatten this part out, it was just on this side of on the facing side. It wasn't on the back side. So let's go and do the back side as well. SZ0. So there we go. Okay, so that should be a lot straighter now. Good. Okay, so it's looking good. It's looking good. And it looks like I'm running on 22 minutes and 40 seconds. So let me do one final thing here before we call part 4 done. And, well, a couple of final things. I noticed since we made the head smaller, the eyes need to be fixed up a little bit. So, tell you what, let's just select the whole shebang there. One vertex from the lens and one from the lens container, and just drag that back. And there we go. Okay, so what I want to do is, since this is a robot, and, I mean, the head could be all one piece if it was made to be, but I'd like to cut it in half and have a seam right there in the middle. But the problem with that is this pie slice shape here, it can cause some issues with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that vertex there in the center and go ahead and delete that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is just create some straighter topology there where there's no triangles there. So what I want to do is grab the very middle of the side there and hit E to extrude out one vertex all the way to the middle. And we'll just drag that down a little bit. And now we're going to create a face between each one of these. I know what you're saying, Dave, that kind of looks like pie shapes too. Well, yeah, it does, but we're not done yet. So what I want to do now is grab the Edge Select tool and select both of these new edges that we created and W subdivide those. And now we'll go back to Vertex Select, and you can see that there's a new one there. So now if I select these 4 here, actually I'll need to do, let's undo all that. Let's subdivide it twice. Subdivide 2 cuts on each side. So now when I see the vertex, oopsie, I did it again. It still had the the cut from previously. So undo, undo, undo. There we go. Start way back. W, subdivide twice. There we go. All right, now I select the new vertex there. Those 4, hit F to create a face. Those 4, so on and so forth until we've sewn that hole back up. So there we go. So now what I want to do is I want to add a seam, a visible physical seam through his head right across there. So I'm going to hit Control L, or excuse me, Control R, and drag a new loop right really close to that seam there. Do the same thing on the other side, really close, and then grab the original middle there and Alt S, scale that down just a bit, if it'll let me, just a bit. There we go. Well, did it on the top. Let's undo that. Alt S, just a bit. There we go. Okay, so now you can see a nice seam there. It kind of looks a little ugly up here, but that's because they kind of started tapering together. So what we can do is select these guys here that are closest to the middle. If I can select the right ones, Control E, and we're going to edge slide those up just a bit, just a bit. The same thing on the back ones. Boy, it's hard to select the right ones. There we go. Control E, edge slide just a bit. Scale that back down. Maybe scale that up just a bit. Okay, and let's grab this corner here, drag that in. Again, just a bit. There we go. Okay, so now we have a seam there. So if we need to crack his head open and fix something in his brain, his electronic brain, we can. It also looks like there's too much of a curve. Let's add a loop right there on the bottom there, just so we have a nice edge there. Okay, so doesn't look like we got that far in part 4, but we got the upper arms done with the boot and things. Now the only other place we're going to be putting the little rubbery boot thing is going to be at the top of the thigh, and it's going to be very similar to the top of the arm. So after that, it's all going to be just hard metallic plastic, whatever he's made out of, the hard ones. So anyways, again, that's all going to be for part 4. Going to be all for part 4. Go ahead and save that. And thanks for watching. I'll catch you in part 5.